Pearl Todokini was born in 1847. She is Delilah and Ona Kona's first child. Pearl was always independent. She was close with her brother Nokwisi. Every day before sundown, her father would tell her and her brother the story of their grandfather. Then they would go to bed. They weren't allowed to stay up too late. Sometimes they would go to Ona Kona's family home for family storytelling. That was the only time they were out past dark. On those nights they would sleep over. The older the children became, the more details Ona would reveal about that night. Nokwisi always had nightmares, but Pearl was never afraid. She loved stories about adventure and would always read up on it. She believed her father's story to be a tale like the books. Pearl liked to go on her own adventures. Ona allowed her to do so as long as she returned before sunset. He would always be waiting when she came home. Even as she grew older, Ona would still watch her leave and wait for her to come back. Pearl would usually spend the whole day out with her horse Coco. She would always lose track of time on her journeys away. When she'd finally come home, she was scolded. But she was still allowed to go out, as long as she returned by sunset. When she disobeyed again, Ona Kona grounded her. Pearl later argued with him about the curfew. Ona tried to explain the dangers of being out after dark, but she wouldn't listen. She didn't believe his stories. He asked Delilah for help because he didn't know what else to do. So Delilah told Pearl to stop disobeying her father. After being berated by her parents, Pearl would vent to her brother about how unfair they were. But Nokwisi agreed that it was unsafe after dark because of the beast. Pearl teased him for still believing those stories. Later that night, after Delilah and Ona Kona went to bed, Pearl went into her brother's room and proposed they look for the beast. Of course, Nokwisi said no because it wasn't worth the risk. So Pearl went out on her own to see if her father's tale was true. She found the same woods from his stories. She got off Coco to look around. It seemed peaceful, so she decided to lay down and watch the stars. Then she heard something. Frightened, Coco ran off, leaving Pearl alone in the woods. At home, Nokwisi worried for his sister. He thought about telling his parents, but he didn't want her to get in trouble. So he went after her himself. He didn't like being out after dark, but he was determined to find his sister. Luckily, he found her quick. Pearl was relieved to see him. Nokwisi expressed how worried he was. She assured him everything was fine. But they couldn't go home without Coco. Together they searched for the horse. They started to worry when they couldn't find him. Then they heard something approaching them. They ran when they saw it. They were separated. The creature chased after Nokwisi. Pearl heard her brother's screams and went to look for him. What she found was horrific. Her brother was gone. Pearl returned home alone that night. She woke her parents and told them what happened. Ona Kona didn't believe her and scolded her for lying, so she brought them to him. Nokwisi Todokini had passed away in 1864. Pearl felt guilty for the pain she had caused her family. If she didn't leave that night, her brother would still be here. Her mother blamed her even more. She would never forgive her. Pearl kept her distance and stayed in her room. The only one who knew what she was going through was Ona. Pearl begged for his forgiveness, but he wasn't mad at her. He told her his stories really were true, and his father was killed by the same beast. Pearl wanted vengeance. She would spend years training to one day confront the beast. Her father didn't want her to get killed, but he couldn't stop her. She spent every night wandering the woods in search for the beasts who hurt her family. During the day, she was at the saloon. Many men tried to make a move on her, but she wasn't interested. However, there was one man who caught her attention. Pearl introduced herself and learned his name was Ryder Hyde. He told her he had seen the beast she was looking for. So they sat down to tell each other their experiences. Ryder told her he had fought the beast many times and had the scars to prove it. He knew how to hurt the beast and suggested they hunt together. So every night Pearl and Ryder would search for the beast in the woods. He would bring his horse along to help. Most nights they wouldn't find anything, but they did find love. In 1870 they were married. They moved to a small house outside of town. They spent the next few years searching for the beast. They had a few encounters, but were never close enough to try anything. In 1874 they had their first child, a little boy named Jock. Then they had another baby in 1875, a little girl named Martha. With their growing family, Pearl's cousin Chaska invited them to stay in their old family home. There they had 5 more children. Abraham in 1879, Rosemary in 1881, Mildred in 1882, Jose in 1883, then finally Francis in 1890. Despite all their children, the couple never stopped looking for the beast. They would teach their children to do the same.